Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Astoria Filmmakers Club podcast. I got a very special guest here today. His name is Ashley Scott Meyers. And Ashley Scott Meyers is actually a filmmaker. He also is the head director, showrunner of Six Figure Film Festival and Screenplay Contest. And he's going to talk to us and give us some, insider experience and tips on how to actually create a screenplay and produce it for six figures, or I want to say less.
Yeah, welcome, or less.
Or welcome, Ash. What's going on, man?
Nothing much. I appreciate you having me on.
Glad you could be here. So I guess just to get the ball rolling, where are you from? What do you do? Sure. And how long you been, would you say filmmaker?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'm very typical. I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland on the East Coast. There was not a lot of artists in Annapolis, Maryland. So I didn't have any real exposure to filmmakers or film type people, but I always loved movies. So I just always had in my mind, I'd love to write screenplays. I went to college. I was an accounting major. Didn't really have that much interest in doing accounting as the years went on, but I didn't really want to double major or switch major. So I just took the accounting degree, finished up there. And then me and a buddy in the mid 90s, we just threw everything we had in a 1954 Ford pickup truck and just drove from the East Coast to the West Coast. And we just settled here in Los Angeles. And we both just started, we hit the pavement and just started trying to make things happen. I'd been writing scripts. And in fact, my friend who we moved here with, our first real sale was a movie called Dish Dogs in the mid 90s. And that was sort of, it was a bittersweet experience. It was our first, option and sale. We made a few bucks. And but the movie didn't really turn out that well. So we, and it's not even that it didn't turn out that well. I mean, we wrote the script and there were definitely problems with our script, but I never felt like the producers were able to kind of fix some of the problems with the script. So the movie was pretty forgettable, but it did give me sort of a first taste of sort of how the business works. And I sort of learned from this experience. It was a movie called Dish Dogs. And again, it was in the mid 90s. It had Brian Dennehy, who was just off his Tony Award run on, I think he did Death of a Salesman, won a couple of Tony Awards. Sean Astin was in it. Matthew Lillard, who had just come off of Scream. So they got a good cast for this movie, but it was a low budget, it was a low budget independent genre film, sort of one of these quirky comedies. It wasn't a studio movie, but there was in the mid 90s, there was a market for these movies. They would put them out on VHS, DVD, you could just make some money. So it was like a $2 million movie. But they definitely changed. It wasn't a great experience artistically, but it was a great experience just getting my sort of toe wet in the business. And I just kept writing scripts and just trying to get my movies made from there. Eventually, I sort of grew weary of that sort of business of selling a script, optioning a script, or even getting paid to do writing on a project. But it wasn't artistically fulfilling for me. So about 5-6 years ago, maybe now 2016, I wrote and directed a super low budget film called The Pinch. And that was sort of my first foray into just being not just a screenwriter, but a filmmaker. I didn't really know what I was doing. I put this movie together, and you talk about less than six figures. The whole all in, I think it was maybe 35,000, 33,000, something like that. We did the typical stuff, Kickstarter. I put a lot of my own money into it, and I'm still getting some returns on that, but I did the typical self-distribution. And but that's really sort of where my career stands now, is I'm doing my own movies. A few years later, my most recent film is a movie called The Rideshare Killer. It's another one. It not only less than six figures, it's less than five. It was a 5-figure movie, less than $100,000. We did this movie called The Rideshare Killer, and we got a decent cast for that. We had Eric Roberts. He's an Academy Award nominated actor. Yeah. And he's in a million things. He's easy to get, easy to work with, especially if you're in LA, because he lives in LA. So we had a decent cast. I put together a number of horror people into our horror movie. We had Oliver Robbins. He was the kid in Poltergeist. Tuesday Night, she was in one of the not Friday the 13th. She was in one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. So we put together a nice horror cast, and that's sort of where I'm at now, is I'm out there sort of marketing my movie. I'll give a little plug. Again, it's called The Rideshare Killer, and it's available on Tubi to watch for free with ads. You can find it just about anywhere, but Tubi is the easiest way to just watch it with ads for free.
I do. I love Tubi.
So do I. The ads really aren't that big of a deal, and you get a really interesting selection compared to like Hulu and Netflix. Their selection is just much more interesting, even if they don't necessarily get some of the top movies.
Well, even still, like these are some hidden gems that you would
Hmm.
usually find like in a Joe's video or a
Yeah,
blockbuster.
exactly. Yep, exactly. That's
Just
exactly what the Tubi is becoming. Exactly, the Joe's video store. You're right.
my God. And I just like I heard everything you said, but I'm still stuck on who is it? Was it Sharon Elizabeth or Shannon
Shannon
Elizabeth?
Elizabeth, correct. Yeah. And in
Oh my
fact,
God.
interesting story. That was really her first movie. She hadn't done American Pie at that point.
Oh
And
no.
yeah, so it was before American Pie. So it was sort of the start of her career. She was real professional, very nice. You knew her lines, really showed up on time. She was a consummate professional. And it seemed like, she sort of was going to go places just because she did have just so much professionalism is how I would describe her. But yeah, it was really one of her first films, and she really wasn't billed. And that was the interesting thing. By the time they got this movie done, American Pie had come out, so she was
Yeah.
kind of having a little bit of a run. So they marketed the movie really with her, but when they cast her, it was just sort of more of a random casting. So it was sort of, I guess, lucky for the producers.
I guess so. So like the one actor though, like you did just say his name, but I think this guy is more or less like he's more. I think he's way more talented than he's actually ever been really accredited for because I've seen him like perform monologues in films where he just puts so many like very well experienced actors to shame, and that was Matthew Lillard.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. He is, and he's gone on to have a pretty good career. He was, he obviously did the Scooby Doo stuff.
Oh
He's done
yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of,
I mean, yeah, he's doing like goofy movies, but
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah, yeah.
like even without a paddle, for example.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly. That was his career for a few years there. And I think now he's doing some more artistic stuff. But for sure, I mean, he's a real actor, despite the fact he kind of got pigeonholed with some of these goofy Freddie Pinch Jr. type movies.
I can't imagine how complicated it is to really stay in your lane to being an actor
Mm-hmm.
like Hollywood, Los Angeles, like medium, because like everybody is very, I don't want to say typecast necessarily, which is somewhat true in most cases, but you ever think that maybe people do get typecast where they want sort of like a guarantee, like game day player for this type of a role?
Yeah, and I think absolutely, and we're talking about low budget films. This is an important point to remember as a producer of a low budget movie is you can do exactly what you're doing, exactly what you're saying. If you go to an actor that's pretty famous, but you go sort of against cast, you can often lure an actor to do a smaller movie if you're giving him something that's interesting to him. For instance, a lot of comedians, they get pigeonholed as comedians, but a lot of comedians are excellent actors and can do drama. And so if you offer some of these famous comedians a dramatic role, they might actually take it seriously, even though the money isn't as good as some of these other offers that they're getting. But they want to, they want to show what they can do and do this. So it's a good way to potentially think about your casting for a low budget movie. And exactly what you're saying, these actors are. Same thing with the drama actors. A lot of drama actors, oh, I'm funny too, and they want that opportunity. If you've got a comedy and you cast some really dramatic actors, famous dramatic actors, you might be able to get them for your low budget movie just because you're sort of going against what they typically get on their desk.
I kind of see why like the low budget independent film community is so valuable where it actually allows actors at some point in their career to really experiment with different character approaches regardless of whether or not it's going to like make money, I'm sure, but
Mm-hmm.
like at least have the option and the availability to really exercise your craft in a more creative way as opposed to like the Hollywood blockbuster model.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. And the same thing for writers. I think, you hear this, especially as writing advice, you often hear this to sort of, get known in one genre, be known in that one genre. And I think there's some truth to that, certainly when you're breaking in, but it's the same thing as writers. We want to branch out. And it's the same thing as a producer. You might be able to get a established writer to give you an option on a script that maybe if he's a comedic writer, typically doing comedies, you might be able to option one of his dramatic scripts. So again, just thinking in those terms, I think can go a long ways for the indie producer.
So, as far as being a writer and really putting yourself as sort of like an architect for, the thing we call the human experience, the storyteller himself,
Mm-hmm.
what was it like almost day one, going from being an accountant now to actually using your imagination and how to articulate a story to actually get some would be now known well actors today. What was it like for you in the early days?
Yeah. And, as I said, I grew up in Annapolis, Maryland. I mean, I didn't know anybody in the entertainment industry. So there definitely was that piece of it just feels surreal, or it doesn't feel like I could ever actually sell a script and get a movie made, because I don't know anybody that's actually done that growing up. But one of the pieces for me that was absolutely very, very essential was having some sort of a marketplace to send my script. Like I always internally, and as an example, in the fourth grade, me and my buddies were going to do our own version of Indiana Jones. And we had like a little camera, home camera and things. And so one day I just sat down and I just wrote a really condensed version of Indiana Jones that we could shoot in my house and neighborhood and stuff. But the bottom line was I always had it in me to write. Like I always sort of wanted to write. And so once I found a way, like, okay, well, what do I wasn't motivated to write until I understood that I had some ability to send it to a producer. And that came really in two forms. I remember one time I was in high school, probably 11th grade or something. And I saw some sort of it was like in between, it was like on HBO, in between movies, they would do these little, like they would have a 2-hour block for a movie, and then they would have 10 minutes before the next movie. So they would fill it with just sort of random stuff. And one of these little random commercials was for some sort of a directory that listed companies looking for screenplays. And I remember seeing that thinking, I should get that. Now, this was long before the internet, so it wasn't easy, but that planted a seed that I knew, okay, if I write something, I know that there's some place out there where I could potentially send it. And then in college, I ran into this thing called the Writer's Market. It was by Writer's Digest, and it's for playwrights and novel writes and poets, and also screenwriters. They had a few production companies that would take unsolicited submissions. And that was really, I would say, the tipping point for me was I sent a letter. Again, this was sort of before the internet had really taken off. So I sent a snail mail letter, and back then you would put a postcard in the letter, like a self-addressed return postcard. And so you'd send them a letter. Here's my pitch. If you want to read the script, just put the postcard back in the mail. So I sent out 2 letters, and I got one letter back from one of these postcards. And the guy said, "Thank you for that undated, untitled manuscript. No thanks." And he said it was a little harsh, but I took the lesson well, that I needed to learn something. I was not really even in the ballpark, but I had another guy out of the 2 letters. The other guy actually called me on the phone, and he said, "Listen," he said, "don't keep sending this out." I mean, I just wrote this thing on printed. I had no formatting, no structure, never even read a screenplay, never even seen a screenplay. The only basis for format at this point I had was going to the library and looking at how they were formatting plays, because that was the only thing that my library had, was a couple of plays in there. So it was formatted incorrectly. Just clearly I didn't know what I was doing. But this guy sort of took pity on me, and he just said, "Listen, don't keep sending out these things. Go do a little research." And at that point, he told me, "Go get Sid Field's book called Screenplay." And if you've never seen a screenplay, if you're in my position, this was absolutely excellent advice. And so that's what I did. I went and found this book, Sid Field's Screenplay, and it really is sort of a nice overview of how screenplays are written. There's a lot of great advice about structure, dialogue, character, the whole bit. And there's even a section in there about marketing it. Who do you send it to? How do you start to get this out? So it's a real good primer. Even to this day, I say I would probably recommend it to people. I think it's been sort of overtaken by Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. I think that's a little easier to read, and it's a little more accessible, I think, with modern audiences or whatever. So I would maybe start now with Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. But those 2 books, if you're looking to get into screenwriting, those are good jump starts. You really can kind of jump start your knowledge and learning experience, or learning about screenwriting through those. So I think that's really what got me sort of motivated, was just actually seeing that there were people out there. And so, as I said, then once me and my buddy graduated, we just drove out to LA and found an apartment and started sending out scripts.
So what was it that made you want to? Well, now, like, you got a lot of experience now as a writer. Like, your resume on IMDb is like, it's very impressive. Like, it's not nothing. So what was it that, I guess, made you want to now start a festival of your own?
So at some point during this process, so this was sort of in the mid to late 90s, was Dish Dogs. That was that movie I mentioned. And then, and I continued to option stuff, and I had some near misses. And there's another credit that I have that's called Rush Lights. That was a script that I wrote called Inheritance. And, again, it just didn't turn out as my vision. The director / producer, he did a lot of changes on it, and it took years and years and years for that to all come about. But at some point I started a podcast, and at some point I realized that there's this whole industry that I knew nothing about. And when I say industry, it's these sort of low budget genre movies, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of these produced every year. And they're not necessarily movies you've heard of, but they do have people you've heard of, like Dish Dogs had Brian Dennehy and Matthew Lillard, Shannon Elizabeth. There were some actual people in these, 1 million, 2 million, nowadays probably $300,000, $400,000 movies. So I started to realize I was in that genre. And so I created a podcast to kind of highlight some of these films and give exposure to them. So I've been doing that now for a number of years. And you can find that at sellingyourscreenplay.com if anybody wants to check that out. But I got to know some of these genre filmmakers, low budget filmmakers. So after a couple of years, I sort of thought I should do a in-person live event. Now, specifically why I was motivated to do this, we shot The Rideshare Killer at the end of 2019. And we were very fortunate because then COVID hit, in March of 2020. So as such a low budget production, I don't think we would have gotten it shot if it had moved into COVID, because we didn't have extra money to hire COVID specialists and all that stuff. So we were fortunate to get it shot, but then we got it edited in 2020. So by 2021, we started going out to the film festival circuit, and, things were starting to open up. COVID was still a big problem, but movie theaters were starting to open but meanwhile we were doing the film festival circuit, and I was so disappointed. I'm in LA. I'm going at this point. This was like, September, October. Now we're talking of 2021. And we got accepted to a bunch of film festivals. COVID was still a thing, but the movie theaters were open. But the festivals were like, oh, it's too dangerous. We're just going to do an online festival. And what was going on at the same time was me and my producing partner, Tony, we were talking to distributors, and they were very, very skeptical that you should show your film at an online film festival, because one of the first questions you get from Showtime, HBO, is where else has this film played? So if you've shown your film internationally at a film festival online, it's sort of a gray area. And Showtime may not like it. So you may be cannibalizing potential. So me and Tony made the decision. We don't want our film showed in an online festival. We want an in-person festival that we can go to and meet other filmmakers. That's the whole point of a film festival, at least in my eyes. So that was part of it. Was I said, what, while everybody else is zagging, I'm going to zig. Everybody's going to do these online festivals, which from my standpoint as a filmmaker, I don't really see there's a lot of value for these online festivals. So, and in fact, there might be a lot of negative value if you show your film there. I mean, these film festivals are not paying the filmmakers to show their film. So you're not going to make any money off this screening, and it could potentially hurt your ability to find distribution down the road. So I decided I'm going to do an in-person festival, and that's what we're doing. We did our first one last year. We had a nice time. It was a big success, and this year we're doing it again. It's October 6th, 6th, 7th, and 8th this year. Submissions have closed, but we'll be doing it again next year. But our website is sixfigurefilmfestival.com. Again, if anybody wants to check that out, and certainly if you're in the LA area and you want to meet some low budget independent filmmakers, that's the community I'm trying to build around this thing. Is just indie filmmakers come out to the festival. We're going to celebrate indie film. We're going to watch, share these films, and hopefully network a little bit. And but really, it's going to be a celebration of these independent films.
I never really quite understood how that concept. Being a film festival director now, why am I how is it my business? Why is it really any of my business where the film was prior to mine? And if so, why? I never quite understood that. Who are you? You're now. To me, it seems like this is a disservice to the filmmaker, because, to be true to form, it is really about the accomplishment of the filmmaker, in my view. Where this is a space where they can showcase their work, and that's it. I just never quite understood that certain, I don't want to say ego, that's probably inappropriate, but like why make it so, I guess, not exclusive, but why even have that standard?
Yeah, yeah,
Like you can't like, and how would you ever really know, you know? Like
yeah,
how
yeah.
would you ever truly find out whether or not they won an award or not? Like how would you ever find out?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm with you. And, I've played that game with my films where when we're going out, we're early in the submission process. We send notes to the film festival directors. Hey, this could be a world premiere. We haven't shown anywhere yet. So we do try and play that card. But I'm with you. I mean, when I'm looking at the films that I'm going to screen at my festival, I want independent films. I want, filmmakers that are going to show up, filmmakers that are passionate about their films and their what they've done. And I agree. I don't, like, does the world premiere of one of these super low budget films, does that really matter? Especially if the premiere was on the other side of the country. It's not like, those people that saw it in New York are not going to come to the LA screening. It's a different market. So I'm with you. I think it's just a prestige thing. I think some of the festivals like that. Oh, we got the world premiere or the LA premiere or the East Coast premiere or something. But
how does that even influence the value of the festival?
yeah,
come
yeah.
on.
I'm with you on that.
No, it's like, no, truly, give me a break. Like, oh,
Yeah.
come on, we have like, I can't even give another example because, I've only, I'm inexperienced compared to most, but like as an actor, as a filmmaker, call myself that, if I guess I could call myself that, like, how does that provide more value to what it is I'm trying to do?
Mm-hmm.
And as far as like develop a career, become whatever, like who am I doing this for? Like, what separates a film festival from another? Just like honestly, like their opinion of your film, that's the only difference that you're really paying for. Like where's the real, I don't know, where's the real value in, unless you're actually showing your film and getting the feedback from the audience directly.
And one of the things we did this year for our festival is we raised our prices significantly. So our festival is expensive to enter into. However, if we don't accept your film, and every film that gets accepted will be screened in a legitimate movie theater here in Los Angeles, we don't accept films and then not screen them. So every film that's accepted will get screened. And if we don't accept and screen your film, we give you 100% refund of your submission fee. And so I felt, again, we're just trying to give value to the filmmakers. As a filmmaker, I hate this idea of spending 50 here, 50 here. And, you spend $500 on 10 festivals and you only get into one of them. And so again, I raise the prices, but at least I feel like the filmmakers that are getting value out of our festival, they're the ones that are going to shoulder more of the cost. We're not going to charge a bunch of filmmakers when we're not going to show the actual festival. So that's been part of my shtick too, but I'm totally with you. I try and approach all of these things as how can I give more value to the filmmakers and just coming up with ideas like that. And I do believe it's, there's a little bit of a self-serving. It's not just because I'm this, you just want to be, rainbows and lollipops and make everything good. There's a certain amount of self-serving. If I feel like if I give a lot of value to filmmakers, there'll be more filmmakers that talk about my festival, that come to my festival and support my festival. So it is a two-way street. And I see so many of these film festivals, there's a reason why filmmakers are so jaded against film festivals. It's because so many of them out there are just sort of a cash grab. They don't really want to, they screen one or two films, they have hundreds of submissions. They screen one or two films for they have one programming block of 2 hours. It's like, and that's where I think Film Freeway actually could be a lot more transparent because those numbers are really the numbers you want to look at. How many, films actually get screened at this festival? And that really, because that's an important metric for filmmakers to know if they're only screening one or two films per season, like what are the chances that your film is going to be the one that's selected? It's a cash grab is what that is. They're going to get 100 submissions. They're going to screen one or two and they're going to make a few $1,000s. And that's just not providing. And then now they're going online, all these online festivals where again, then they don't even have to rent the theater. They're saving even more money. But again, it feels like a cash grab because it is a cash grab in my opinion.
And then what? Now that you're at this film festival, are you actually going what are we talking film festival original? Like they take that money, work with the filmmakers that they like, and then actually make something and compete? Like,
Yeah, yeah. No, that would be a good idea. Exactly. At least pulling some of that money from these festivals that are just a cash grab. You know, if they pulled the money and put it back into a film, I probably wouldn't have a problem with that. But
Yeah.
I just fundamentally, I have a problem with this idea that, because if you think about how this actually works, I mean, a lot of services out there that sell to screenwriters are the same sort of thing. I mean, a screenplay contest works under the same basic model. It's essentially the hundreds of bad screenwriters are basically, you know, paying for the good screenwriters to launch their careers. You know what I'm saying? It's like all these bad screenplays come into the contest. They're paying the entry fee, and then you're only as the person running the contest. And I do think that there's inherently, I think there is something wrong with that, especially once you're talking about a finished film. A screenplay, maybe you can make some arguments, but especially a finished film, I just feel like it always just really rubbed me the wrong way when I would submit to 10 festivals. Maybe I get into 1 out of 10. I've spent a bunch of money, but it didn't feel right as a filmmaker. I'd rather have some guarantee up front that, hey, you're going to accept my film or you're going to refund me the money. And if you accept my film, I'll show up and I'll support the festival. You know, it's a two-way street. The festivals need support just like the filmmakers need support.
I would really like to see something like that where like special thanks to, for example, that hate to say Tribeca, but just they got a brand like, you know, how you got special thanks down at like at the end of the credits where thank you to the state of Georgia, Ontario, or something like that. How nice would it be if a very special thank you came from a film festival that you would actually see in a movie somewhere where they actually paid it forward and actually really supported somebody that was in their festival, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I think that's the way it should, or that's the way it's supposed to be, because then now it's more of like I guess more of like a call it a macro ecosystem or something like that. But that's what it's really about. You know, you're actually contributing to the art form for the art's sake.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I agree.
Well, if I can with the Triborough Film Festival, I will. Just give us I don't know, by the 5th year, maybe we'll actually have like a well-established brand in the city of New York. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, exactly, exactly. And I hope the same thing for my festival. And actually, the filmmaker Michael Baumgartner, who he won our festival last year, he had a movie, and he's returning this year with another film that he did. And so, you know, just I hope that I can really build some relationships with filmmakers and the good filmmakers, the filmmakers that are productive, are putting out movies. Those are the guys I want in my film festival. Those are the films I want to be highlighting. You know, filmmakers that are consistently putting stuff out, you know, quality stuff out, and just having that relationship and building that community.
So I guess like having experience, like even with the like more or less your movies were in movie theaters, right?
I actually did see Dish Dogs in a movie theater. Yeah, but these films don't spend a lot of time in the theater. Let's put it to you like that. They typically do a run. There's some I don't understand the financials, but some of these movies like Dish Dogs, Rideshare Killer and The Pinch, those are ones that I wrote and directed and produced. They had no theatrical screening at all. Now, some of the other movies did, like Rush Lights and Dish Dogs. But again, I'm not sure I understand exactly the economics, but it's sort of like that New York Times bestseller list. You want to just be on there for a certain. You want to be able to say you got a theatrical release. So they'll typically run them in like 4 cities. And I think for the most part, they're paying the theaters to just run them. And then when they go to Netflix and Hulu, they can check that box that it got a theatrical release. So it increases the value on the aftermarket for these films. But no, these films are not really widely released in theaters.
No, still, I mean, you got a taste of that, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. And I hope that that's what I can give to the filmmakers in my film festival. We've got a great theater. It's called the Look Dine and Cinema here in Glendale, right outside Los Angeles. And it's a great theater. You know, they bring food to your things. It's just nice seats, nice screening. And so that's exactly the experience. Exactly. A lot of these low budget movies, they will never be shown in an actual movie theater. So that's, again, hopefully part of the value that I can add is filmmakers can come, they can see their movie with the audience inside of a movie theater.
Yeah, there's no better feeling for me. Like
Yeah.
that honestly, it always felt like a sanctuary for me going into a theater, watching a movie, whether it's like a more or less blockbuster, or even like the independent film ones that I'm watching now. Like I'm blown away as a creative. Like these are my peers, you know, like this is the kind of work that I would like to apply myself to in order for me to get better type of stuff, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I was curious, like for those of us, I guess, based on your experience, like let's just say they're having like trouble getting anybody to really like invest in their idea. What helps them? Is it more or less having a well-established, articulate script to tell your story so they can put together like an accurate budget? Like, what are some of the key elements for a creative to get their ball, I guess, rolling?
Well, I think there's a number of things, and there's a number of layers to that. I think number one, as a writer, you have to take a step back and understand what kind of writer you want to be. And so there's different potential angles. Like if you want to be a TV writer, which I just have never done, I've just never been that into TV. I've always been more into features, but we are in this sort of golden age of television. So if you really do want to write in the arts and be creative, I think TV writing is a great way to pursue that. But it's a very sort of tried and true traditional route to getting those jobs. And there's a lot of these, and again, I'm not sort of in this space, but there's a lot of these fellowships that are given out by NBC or Disney, and getting into those fellowships is a tried and true way. The winners of those fellowships will often get placed as a writer's assistant in a writer's room. So that's sort of the first step. And then, so that's a tried and true way. The other tried and true way is getting on to one of these TV shows as like a production assistant and working your way up to writer's assistant, writing a spec script of that thing, getting to know the people, and then so there's different angles depending on what you want to do. And that's sort of the overview of the TV one. Again, that's not my forte. So I'd say if that's where you're headed, you do a little more digging than what I just explained. But in terms of the indie films, I mean, the studio films, I think, are somewhat similar. These are, big studio movies are vastly different than these movies I'm talking about. And this, you can see, I have another movie, Man Overboard, back here, the Pinch poster. I mean, these are low budget genre films. They're niche films. They're not, but the good news is, I mean, a big studio movie has to have a big studio appeal. If they're going to spend, 40, 50, 100, $200 million on a movie, it's got to have mass appeal. Whereas when you're making a movie for $100,000, it doesn't necessarily need to have that same mass appeal. It just has to have a strong appeal to a smaller number of people. So, there's always these sort of different things. But I think if you're going to be a low budget genre film or a studio film, or a studio film screenwriter, I think starting with contests, entering a bunch of screenplay contests, going and pitching people, networking at events, just getting out there and doing stuff is probably the first thing you do. Obviously, you have to write a lot, write a bunch of screenplays. There's no, that's really number one. If you want to be a writer, you got to start writing. And, Oliver Stone, he's very famous. By the time he wrote Platoon, that was his first sort of script that got him recognition. I think it was like his 10th or 11th script. Not nobody, but very few people are just born great screenwriters. Even great screenwriters had to write a bunch of lousy scripts to get to the point where they really mastered it. So that's number one. You got to write a lot. You got to watch a lot of movies. You got to read a lot of scripts. You got to be immersed. And then you got to start attacking the marketing front. And that's what I'm talking about with the contests. There's my services at sellingyourscreenplay.com. There's other similar services, inktip.com. The Blacklist is another one. These are all services where you can upload your script and producers can potentially find it. Inktip has leads that they send out. We also at Selling Your Screenplay, we have leads that we send out where producers will email us and say, I'm looking for this particular script. So you just have to get yourself immersed in this sort of stuff. But I would say the number one thing that I think new writers sort of often underappreciate is exactly what I'm saying here, is that you have to understand what you have and who your audience is. I think that there's this naive notion that if the script is really good, it'll make it to the production. And that's unfortunately not as simple as that. The script doesn't necessarily, the script has to be good, obviously, but it not only does it have to be good, it has to fit some sort of a niche or some sort of a lane where the producers and the financiers think they can actually make their money back. And that's not always that simple. And just because your script is good, if you have a drama, It's like there's not a huge audience for a drama. So if you've got a drama that takes place in 1700, where you need a bunch of costumes and horses and sets and stuff, and it's like, what is the market for that? How is that, just from a practical economic standpoint, how is that movie going to work? It's going to be very difficult. You're going to need Meryl Streep as your lead actress. It's just the only way that thing's going to work is if you do it a very, very specific way. No matter how good the screenplay is, you're still going to need Meryl Streep opening that movie for you. You're still going to need this A-list director. You're still going to need huge production value. That stuff is expensive. And again, it becomes more risky as opposed to more of the action movies, some of the comedy movies. I mean, horror movies, thrillers. These are movies, thrillers, horrors, action. Those are movies that can travel the world. You got, a potential entire planet Earth of people that can watch those movies. So I think understanding your audience and understanding that the writing obviously is the number one thing. It's the most important thing, but it's not the entire thing. And always remember that the marketing, the networking, and understanding where you're going to potentially send this script before you even write it. You should understand what you're writing and how you're going to potentially market this screenplay. And what is it? Is it just a writing sample? If you're just looking to break in to do studio level writing, then you don't need to worry about budget. You could write your 1700 period piece, because there you just want the writing to speak for itself, where a studio will hire you. They're not going to produce this movie, but they're going to hire you to write on some of their other projects. And so that's another angle, but you need to figure out first as a writer what you're sort of going for and what you're trying to do. I mean, as I said myself, I understand we're in this golden age of television. I understand there's a lot of writing jobs in television, but it's just not my thing, So I don't spend a lot of time trying to do that and do a million different things. I'm sort of focused now on these low budget genre movies, figuring out a business model where I can make these low budget genre movies the way I want to make them, in my own time, and actually pull a profit on them. That's what I'm trying to do right now. But you as a filmmaker, you got to figure that out. And that's going to tell you what you can write on, what you can produce, what you can work on.
So, geez, man, sorry to
yes, that was a long answer to a simple question.
It's like a buzzkill. There's nothing simple about, this
yeah.
about this. I've always complimented filmmaking and the process of it, because historically, just barely in the last, not even 100 years between motion picture first figuring it out. To our knowledge, I haven't heard any other different theories that this is the first time in human existence where a medium like this exists, where we could actually broadcast some sort of visual, even like what we're doing right now. We could broadcast ourselves visually, technologically, anywhere on the planet. I don't think that's ever existed before, and that turn that into an art form is even more miraculous, So yeah, there's nothing simple about this, and I appreciate it. I take it all in, where it's just like, what a phenomenon, when what it truly is. It's a phenomenon.
And the one other angle that I would recommend to, again, young people coming up with something we haven't even mentioned is, the TikTok and the YouTube, build a following there. And because again, that's writing, that's performing, that's directing, that's acting. And, we all have a cell phone at this point. So that's another great way to just sort of cut your teeth and start to build an audience. This is the key to especially independent filmmaking, but all filmmaking to some degree, certainly as a director, as a writer. Building an audience is absolutely key. Having an audience that knows you and follows you and will buy your movie when you're ready to go is an important thing. So I think if you're a young person now, you don't have a lot of money, but you got a cell phone, write little, and you're a comedy writer, write comedy skits. If you're a dramatic writer, a thriller writer, horror writer, write little horror skits. I have two young kids, two daughters, 10 and 13. So I see what they watch. And some of these things are kind of ridiculous. They watch this one called Life of Luxury, and it's these two bros that go to these haunted houses, and they're completely ridiculous, but they're real good at capturing the creepiness. They're terrible actors. The acting's terrible. The production value is terrible. The logic of these things doesn't really make sense, but they're real good at that one thing of sort of capturing the horror and the scariness of these sort of weird weird situations that they put themselves in. And again, they've built, I think they're getting millions. I think they have 7 million subscribers to their YouTube channel. They have, millions of views on these videos. And, those are guys that, now that they've built an audience, they could do a Kickstarter. They could do a feature film if that's the direction they wanted to go. They could start to branch out and stuff. But the key component there is they've spent years building this audience by putting out this very low budget stuff. But there is something about it. I watch it and it borders on mystery science theater type stuff, but there's something about it. As I said, these guys are able to capture something that's sort of creepy and scary. And they have a good, there's a certain tone to it that they sort of understand that what they're doing is a little bit low budget or whatever. So it's very entertaining. But again, they've built a really big following, and for sure they have enough of a following now. They could actually branch out. They could do like a feature film, and they could start to get some, and they could do an independent feature film. And there's an audience for that, because my daughters would track this down on Tubi and they would watch that feature film from these guys.
Right. Jeez, man. What a whew.
Welcome to Happy Corner. This project strives to make safe housing areas for stray cats at an affordable price. It's so easy to put together that even your children could have fun making one. Help keep cats and other animals safe with their own little Happy Corner homes. You can help this project become a reality by donating to the GoFundMe page. Happy Corner homes are a great way to show those animals in need it's okay to be happy.
How would you compare filmmakers or filmmaking, or even like the dynamics between New York City filmmakers and Los Angeles guys?
That's a good question. I'll ask you the same question when I'm done. I mean, there's definitely, and you're a part, I'm from the East Coast. I'm from Maryland. My mom is from Long Island. So I think I have a little bit of the East Coast sort of just in my DNA and sort of that New York things. But New Yorkers are a little, I don't know if aggressive is quite the right word, but there is a sort of a, you guys are hustle bustle. There is a certain sort of just attitude, and there is a California vibe that's a little bit more, new agey and hippie. There is that sort of vibe, but but I do think there's also a lot of similarities because they're also big cities. There's a sophistication to the actors and the location things. And I'll give you a prime example. New York and LA, if you're shooting an independent film, and I can't speak to New York because I haven't shot there. And so I'll be curious to hear your thoughts. But when you go into a restaurant here in Los Angeles, say, hey, we want to shoot a movie, and they're like, oh yeah, CBS was here last week. They were paying $5,000 a day to use our restaurant. You're like, well, we're indie. We're more like, $200 a day. And so there's this thing. But if you're in Nebraska and you go into a restaurant, and you say, hey, can we shoot our movie? They just think it's a cool thing. Yeah, sure. We'll give you some free food. You can come in here, no cost. You know what I'm saying? And so those are sort of the types of differences that I see, and just practical differences that I do see. I think that there is in the LA, just in terms of the filmmaker, because when you told me, oh, you went to New York to be an actor, this guy told you go to New York to be an actor, and that's what you did. So I'd be curious exactly why did you choose New York versus LA? I think that there is an attitude, and I think there's some truth to it. There is an attitude of LA of sort of Hollywood, the glitz and the glam and the money and the beautiful people. And I think that there is a little bit more of a grittier attitude from the New York filmmakers, where is a little more, Martin Scorsese. There's just a little bit more of that, gritty, artistic type of a vibe.
There's different cultures, no doubt about it. And I guess the just execution of filmmaking on both sides. Like, I was born in Brooklyn, okay. So this is home.
So yeah. So it made sense for you. Have you ever considered coming to LA though? And why wouldn't you move to LA?
I mean, there was a lot of variables that led me to want to go to LA. I just never I would the any time I've ever been to Los Angeles was just for whatever type of my daytime job or a day-to-day traveling salesman job that I had at the time that would just take me around the country while I was still pursuing acting. I got more of a theater background before I became more like little dabbling into film, and now trying to create my own. And my background always used to be just like in construction. I'm a blue collar guy. I never really had I've always had creativity. Like I played an instrument as a kid, but I never really thought this would definitely be a possibility for me until I went to college, which was by accident in itself. I got hurt on the job, had to go to college for health insurance. The next thing you know, take an intro to theater class, and I just gave it a shot. And it just kind of always brought me back in because there was always somebody. My career, for lack of a better term, is only where it is because somebody needed me to help them with their movie or something like that. Like my aunt, she lives in where is it? Oh God, I know the name of it. It's in Los Angeles. Starts with a B. It's something in Los Angeles, California,
Like a
where
city like Bel Air or something like that.
Burmark or something like that. I can't believe it's forget. I never forgot the
Yeah,
name.
no worries.
So anyway, in Los Angeles, California, there's a neighborhood that starts with a B. Burbank.
Yeah, Burbank. Yeah, sure.
There it is. Burr something.
Okay.
Burbank. So my aunt lives in Burbank, and during the '90s, she got a really big break as an actress, stunt woman on the Hercules series or Xena Warrior Princess series. And she ended up getting cast as like the water goddess of and played like this character that Xena or Hercules would have to fight. And she would come back and do all these things. Her name is Aunt Catherine or Aunt Katie, I call her. So basically, that's my dad's cousin's wife. That's my aunt, and we've spoken just about the industry and what it's like, and the party scene versus like the work scene, and then like the history of like Brad Pitt, being a background actor somewhere along the way, he finally like his way up through the ranks. That's something similar that I've done here on the East Coast. Except fun story about me is that when I said a line on set when I wasn't supposed to, they kept it and I got paid for it. That's the difference between me and Brad Pitt. But what I always heard them say, I know, shout out Brad Pitt. I really hope to meet that guy. He seems like awesome. The industry, it always seemed like from the inside or from the outside looking in, was that in the early days, they would always refer to Hollywood as fast food, I guess that's more of like the blockbuster thing where it's like they want to like put as little money into it and hope for the greatest return on the investment, not so much sort of like the experience or the art side of it, or at least that's maybe the way it used to be. I think there's been a pretty big and amazing transition with really good films coming out of Hollywood, or at least for a while there has been. But somewhere along the way, and especially the last, like, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, there seems to be sort of like a lull. And it's no offense to the industry. It just seems like maybe not enough proteges or directors learning from real professional directors to carry on their experience to bring to the work field has been sort of like reinforced. Like whenever I met 3 very key Hollywood directors here in New York. The first one I met, like just off the top of my head, was Clint Eastwood. I got to meet him on the set of Sully, where I got to go be on set, get some experience, background actor, just, try to pay the rent and eat some free lunch. But I did. I got to see how Tom Hanks worked. I got to see exactly how Clint Eastwood works, and just basically like, just the coordination on how to actually orchestrate a film set. And those were always my takeaways by being on film set. I learned even more when I got to be on set for Woody Allen's Wonder Wheel down in Coney Island. So, and I got to like see him. I got to like, of course, see like this one guy from the press jumping in the middle of a scene, taking pictures of what's his name from NSYNC. I forget. It'll come back to me, but Justin Timberlake, that day of shooting, but just how to work and just like the simple process. And when I would ever get cast in a student film, just to kind of like read the dynamics of the shift of what the differences actually are. And they're really not that different. They're just executed at a much more, I guess, just a different scale and a different level, and I guess a different level of expenses and permits, And my one of my favorites to actually learn from was Steven Spielberg, because I've been on set for Bridge of Spies as well as The Post. Both of them were Tom Hanks films. That's cool. I was in 3 Tom Hanks movies, which is awesome. Can't believe I just said that out loud. I just realized. But I did. I got to, I think it was Guillermo who did that water film that happened a few years ago.
Yeah.
Alan Alda I met on set, Guillermo I met on set. I didn't know who they were right away. I didn't even recognize them. I was just like, "Hey guys, good morning. How's everybody doing?" Yada yada, being the big mouth I am. And of course, like watching how Steven Spielberg would work, and just kind of like just the energy of us, what we're doing during the day, what we're doing at lunchtime, how we're talking to each other at lunchtime, how we're finishing up the day, and just trying to apply any type of acting training I've ever acquired to that scene. And there is a big shift in a dynamic between doing in the independents and the features. But I feel like for me personally, there's like the process as an actor is always the same.
Mhm.
I never really quite understood uh, if there were any dynamics of how Hollywood works or how New York works. It's just like two different types of food. I think there's more of a gourmet approach to like the creation and the artistic side of actually
Mhm.
like enjoying the experience of a meal. And I think that shows in the restaurants we have here. Not to say like California doesn't have that, but I think it's a cultural thing where there's a little bit more of an authentic approach to the work that we're actually doing. And I haven't been on a film set in California before. I don't, at least I don't, I really don't think I ever have. But it just seems like that type of energy here in New York. It's much more. It's more of, I would have to say, a gourmet approach where we're really trying to create like a sustainable long term, maybe even a film before its time type of a film.
Mhm.
From what I've
And I
gathered.
think for sure, yeah, no, I definitely get that sense. I mean, there's a lot of people in Hollywood that are way more concerned with the money and the fame and the glitz and the glam than they are about the work, doing good work and doing interesting, cool projects. And I think you get less of that in New York, but I think you're absolutely right. But at the end of the day, everybody's kids got to go to college. Everybody has to eat. So a lot of those theater actors from New York, they do ultimately, and from the UK, everybody ultimately ends up in Hollywood, just because that is where the money is. But for sure, there's a piece of that. I think that's a good analogy. The gourmet meal is versus the fast food.
I've always thought that, but I never really got to express that and say that out loud.
Yeah.
It's just my take on it because like I watch movies daily, weekly, monthly, my entire life.
Yeah. And listen, I'm in LA, not to say there's not some great films coming out of LA. Obviously there is, but I think there's definitely a little bit of that, or there's some truth to that for sure.
But what's your favorite film?
My favorite film. Well, when people ask me that, it's always, but I will say this: Star Wars Episode 4, The New Hope, the original Star Wars film. I'm one of the people. I mean, that film just hit me right. Like I am that demographic. I grew up in the 80s. I saw the original Star Wars in the movie theater when I was a little kid. One of the first films I ever saw, and that profoundly impacted me and my brother's childhood in the sense, all the toys for Christmas, all the, the stuff, we had all the sheets and the trading cards and the toys and the lunch boxes, all that stuff. So I have to just say, and that in some way that inspired me, I think, to become a filmmaker. Just Star Wars was just a watershed moment in my life, that really no film even really comes close to. But I've seen other films that obviously there's other films I really, really love, but in terms of impact on my life, for sure, I'm one of those guys, that Star Wars really hit just square.
I mean, I can't even imagine the gamble back then where, filmmaking, especially in the 70s, on like the technology limitations, like sci-fi wasn't really like a thing at all during the 70s.
Yeah.
Not to my,
and there was that, and there was a meme. This
Star
was
Trek
maybe,
maybe.
What's that?
Like with Star Trek, very little. But
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I saw this meme maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago on Facebook, and it was a letter from someone who had read the screenplay of Star Wars like 5 years before it was produced or 3 years before it was produced. And he had a whole bunch of criticism of Star Wars. And all my friends on Facebook were making fun of how dumb this guy is. But, as a script analyst, as someone who writes screenplays, a lot of his points were spot on. Like, he was basically creating like almost a new genre. And in hindsight, it seems so easy, but that's an incredibly difficult thing to do. And exactly what you're saying, this was a movie that had incredible risk with it. Just all the stuff. Yeah. And it's not like George Lucas was this proven commodity at this point. So there was a lot of risk to that. And it's easy for us now to say in hindsight, who wouldn't green like this? But at the time, that's a difficult decision.
Well, I mean, when you read it, how could you even relate to it? And then of course, between like of course, Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford is Harrison Ford now, but once upon a time, the guy was in his 30s, just like working jobs, odd jobs here and there, just like every one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he becomes Han Solo, this very iconic uh, character. And then you got Mark Hamill, and of course, like between his early days and not really doing anything, I can't believe they landed James Earl Jones to do anything to do with this, because that guy, he's a theater actor. He was pretty much the guy to come in, and they didn't even use him other than as a voiceover. And it's like, but James still did it,
But that's the thing. You really listen to that, though. I'm sure from James Earl Jones's point of view, this was, it was easy because he only had to do the voice. So he just probably had to show up for like 3 days in a recording studio. So it was probably very easy on him. They probably paid him a decent amount of money, probably not his normal rate or anything. But again, he got to be cast in something that's not normal for him. I mean, he's doing he's got this great voice. So it was something that totally went against cast. And again, that's to my earlier point. That probably was very interesting to him. Coming to him with that project, letting him do something that he's not used to doing, probably was fun and interesting. And that's probably what ultimately was the incentive.
Well, I remember seeing him in a couple like very early day movies like that are now on Turner Classic Movies, but even in the later parts of his career, like when he does a movie like Sandlot, and you just hear this guy like in real life, his demeanor and his love for theater, and his love for the art form. He was even in Conan the Barbarian in the original one, and
that's right. Yep,
that was very Shakespeare. He did some like real Shakespearean techniques in how he'd even talk and present themselves. I think, honestly, if you really want to be in this, I think you have to be in love with it. I think like it's going to be like this relationship where it brings you so much like joy and fulfillment. But I think he is like literally the perfect example off the top of my head who truly does love this work.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you have like any moments of like turn back moments where it's just like you didn't know if this was for you anymore?
Yeah, like if I'm completely honest, I don't know that I really ever did. I mean, when I pulled out, as I said, literally me and my buddy took all our junk, threw it in a 1958 Ford pickup truck, drove out here. I mean, my mom, my brother, my dad, they were convinced I'd be back in 3 months. They were rolling their eyes a little bit, but no, I mean, I basically like California. I live in a nice area. As I said, I've got kids and a wife and a family and stuff. So I've made my life out here. So no, and I think there's a lot of opportunities. I mean, I often think back, like, what would have I ended up doing if I'd stayed in Annapolis, Maryland? I probably would have because ultimately, and that's sort of the part of the story I left out since we were talking about screenwriting, but during this mid 90s period, I got into web development, and that's a big piece of why I'm running Selling Your Screenplay. There's some technical things, so I worked as a developer for many years professionally, as a web developer. So I have that background. And I think ultimately, if I had stayed in Maryland, that's what I would have ended up doing. So I don't know that I think there's actually more opportunity for just as a young web developer here in LA than there would be in Annapolis. So I think it was not a bad place for me just to be in general. It's just a bigger city. There's just more opportunity than someplace like Amazon. So I don't know that I really ever did have any turn back moments, but I'm also very practical. So it wasn't like I was sitting here when I got here, just hoping I'd sell that screenplay, running out of money and hoping I got a job. The first job, I played tennis in college. So the first job I got out here was at Toluca Lake Tennis Club, which is actually right outside Burbank. You mentioned Burbank. And I was just working at the front desk, making whatever, $7 an hour, $8 an hour. But, I got that first job. So I was pretty good with money. I was very practical. So I never had like financial problems just pushing me out, that sort of stuff. So I always sort of liked LA. Again, even removing the fact that I'm in the entertainment industry, I basically like LA. I like living here. I like the weather. I hate the cold weather. Even in Maryland, I know it's a lot colder in New York than it was in Maryland, but even in Maryland, I hated the winters. The heat never bothered me. So yeah, no, I think it's a good place for me, even if the entertainment industry wasn't here.
Well, now in New York, we got like we're competing with Georgia now. Up in the Hudson Valley, there's like a 40% tax credit for
really? Wow.
Yeah, it's 40% now. It's like 30% for the entire state, but an additional 10% for a couple counties in the Hudson Valley and Catskill region.
Yeah. So I think that will get more people shooting in the area. For sure, those things do work. There's always this sort of debate whether that's a good idea long term to have these incentives, but that just seems to be sort of the way the world works now. So I think that will be a big thing for New York.
It's I mean, I still feel like sometimes I'm green, regardless of how many hours on the stage or experience I got of just like working my craft. You know what I mean? It's just finding my way to navigate. It's always been very complicated because I don't like I'm still trying to, I guess maybe still finding my way. Did you ever find yourself to be more of a director than you are a writer?
No, and that's another good point. I would say if I was completely honest with myself and your audience, and I listed my sort of aptitude and skill set, I would say number one, truthfully, even though I've spent the most time trying to pursue screenwriting and writing screenplays, I would say I'm probably a better producer than I am writer, just in terms of my aptitude and just how I am. But then I would probably list screenwriter after producer, and then I would definitely put director at the bottom. I don't have a lot of experience as a director. I've just directed these 2 films. I've done some shorts and other things that I've directed, but the problem I'm finding with directing, and it's to your point, when you were on set with Clint Eastwood, you sort of got to look at how things were working. I haven't spent a lot of time on set. So that's one of the things I'm actually considering for my next film, is being a producer, writer, and hiring a director so that I can learn as a director. I go back and forth. I do think too, I saw an interview with Quentin Tarantino once where he was talking about Reservoir Dogs, and, he was faced with the same thing. He knew he wasn't very experienced at that point as a director, but he did also know that he knew the material better than everyone. And he was going to he was going to be the shepherd of getting that material, to the finish line. So I do think there's some truth to that. As the writer and the producer, I can, really make sure it's my vision. But no, I'd say I'm my skill set and sort of my aptitude is probably I'm weakest at directing of the 3.
So like what's your network like in the California region? Where do you guys kind of collaborate and like one hand washes the other? It's just sort of like, how do you guys
I think there's for sure there's some of that. And this is something I would recommend, and it sounds like that's sort of what you've done with your filmmakers club. I was in a writers group for years, and that was sort of my networking. I got to meet a lot of other writers, and I got to meet a lot of actors. We would do a read every week on Tuesday nights. 3 writers would bring in 25 pages. You'd be there for about 3 hours. Actors would get on stage and you'd read these 25 pages in sort of a table read type of a setting. So I got to know actors and stuff. And I've used those actors in my movies. I've used those connections. So it's exactly what you're talking about. You get to a place, you network. And, I've been here a good number of years. Because I haven't spent a lot of time on set, I'd say my network is very thin in terms of like crew, grips, gaffers, cinematographers. I have a pretty thin network in that regard, but in terms of like actors and writers and that sort of stuff, I've been in that space for a while, so I know a lot of other actors, a lot of other writers, and those are they're great resources. They're great resources, just not always in a one-to-one type of a thing, but just having those people where you can reach out to, hey, what do you think of this script? Or hey, what do you think of that? Or hey, could you come? I'm doing a table read as an actor, getting actors to come out and to support your material. I had a movie or a screenplay that I was helping to kind of produce. We had an actor, they had some funding. So, I can call on those actors. We did a Zoom reading. This was during COVID so it's like having those networks and those people in place. That's definitely a big part of the game. And again, these are people that just want to do the work. They're not, they're people I know, they're my friends, my colleagues. And so getting them in, they're excited. These are actors. When I call them up, hey, I'm doing a short, come and be in my short. These are people you don't have to pay, we're doing this thing as a collective. It's low budget and this sort of stuff. So I definitely think having that network is important. And for me, just how I was able to accomplish that in large part was going to this writers group and just really being a part of that community and getting to know the people over the course. I was there for 10 years and I'm still in contact with, lots and lots of those people.
You guys ever have like a Christmas type of party?
Absolutely. For sure. Yeah. There's a Christmas party, a summer party, and just other networking events. I mean, I got an email yesterday. They're getting together at a bar next Tuesday evening after the group. They sort of moved to Zoom during COVID. And so the writers group is sort of in flux with all of that. But yeah, they still have in-person meetings that, you meet up and you just talk to people. Hey, what are you working on? What are you doing? And, maybe there's collaboration, co-writing stuff. I've definitely met people that I've written scripts with through those two types of those relationships.
Right on, man.
Yeah.
So,
So
oh God, it just literally, oh my God, how did I just forget a cool question? All right, it'll come back to me. So if anybody wanted to like maybe get in touch with you or collaborate with you, is the best way to go through the film festival or to go directly to
I
your
think
website?
just my website. Yeah. And I'm easy to get a hold of. At this point, I answer most of the email that comes into Selling Your Screenplay. So just info at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Send me an email. I'm happy. I mean, I think that's how you and I first, you sent me an email about the contest and I was the one that actually responded to it. So I'm pretty good about getting back to people on email. So if you have a question, but do check out my podcast too. And I publish that weekly, sellingyourscreenplay.com. It's free. Obviously it's just a podcast, but that's a good way to sort of learn about what I'm doing. Cause I talk about some of my own projects, but then I also interview a filmmaker. Typically he'll have a film that's coming out. He'll be a writer, director, and I'll have him on. We'll talk about the script. We'll talk about how he got the movie produced. And again, it's all free. So definitely check that out if you want to kind of learn more about what I'm doing.
I'm actually, I've actually listened to your podcast. I think maybe that's how I got on your radar, you on my radar for a while. Like I remember listening to this podcast like about a year ago. It could have been a year ago. Feels like it was probably a month ago, but it feels like a year.
Yeah.
And there was oh my God, I can't remember his name, but I might have gotten turned on to your podcast by this one guy. He does like Filmmaker Confidential podcast. But he and I actually met on something called, oh my gosh, I don't even forget, Shapr, SHAPR. There was this app for a while called Shapr that I was on, and it was sort of very similar to a LinkedIn, where it's a swipe left, swipe right of people in your network in order to network with. And it was just called Shapr. It was like this guy from France developed this app. And while I was in California a couple of years ago, I would Shapr like crazy, and people within sort of like, I guess, the filmmaking industry, I would connect to them and just talk that way. So I forgot what I was. Oh, Stephen Balderson. There it is. All right. Steve Balderson is somebody I met, and I'm almost certain that I got your podcast information through him. I'm not sure if you met him, but he's like, he's a very gifted, talented filmmaker as well. But I know he's been out in California now for, well, I think over a decade at this point.
Huh. Yeah. So no, there's a lot of podcasts out there, and I try and have other, just network with other podcasters and get to know some of that space too. And, I think podcasting is such a great medium really for everyone. It's so portable. You can download it on your phone. You can listen in your car. You can listen in your dentist office for 15 minutes. It's just a great way to really get some real insight, and people are so available now, people far more successful than us. I mean, you can find Spielberg and you can find these guys coming on podcasts and really, hearing high level information and just listening to these things. I think it is so important, just understanding how everybody's point of view and how they're seeing the industry and where they think the industry's going.
Well, I think honestly, regardless of what level of accomplishment or quote unquote success or experience you may or may not have, we all crave the exact same thing. And that's to be a part of a community, definitely contribute in some way, shape, or form for what it is we all have a likeness towards. And I think that's what really connects us, and the arts could actually really, solidify that. Everything else, for lack of a better word, is all make-believe, regardless of your social status, your income, your outcome. There's no difference between any of us. And I think it's more important for like your own sake, for God's sake, or whatever have you not. You got to pay it forward and pass on that knowledge and information in any way that you can. And I think we crave that because it keeps our hopes alive.
Yeah, for sure.
This was just a nice conversation, man. I really like.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you reaching out. Yeah, absolutely. This was a fun conversation. And I hope the people listening to this do get something out of it. As I said, I'm easy to get a hold of. So if anybody has any follow-up questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out, and definitely do check out my podcast, sellingyourscreenplay.com.
Oh, dude, yeah, I'm gonna be plugging you like crazy. Like
okay, good.
For every guest that we've had, I do the marketing thing. We got the YouTube thing. We're giving all the information and the details on how to stay in touch with everybody. But we do wrap up every show with one segment, which is I guess what kind of makes our show. So this segment is called "The Right Words at the Right Time," and I started doing the segment because when I was first in the early days of becoming an actor, just like day one stuff, I was always reading this one book that I got my hands on called The Right Words at the Right Time by Marcy Hopkins. And that book really struck a nerve with me because I always like imagine that maybe I would become a very famous actor someday or something along that line. And in this book was a collection of very well-known famous actors, household names, but it was also athletes that I heard of or knew, or politicians, or people of like high social status. But every single one of them had something in common. Before they became a household name, they were all given something, like the right words at the right time. And that's why I'm asking basically the same question to everybody who comes on this show.
Mhm.
Basically the same thing. Has anybody ever given you the right words at the right time that have just always stuck with you, that have kept you motivated to keep going, that have just been there with you, that you've always remembered, that was for better or worse, to get you through and overcome any obstacle that you had to get you to the point where you are right now? Or do you have any words that you would like to share with an audience member?
It's such a deep, profound question. And exactly, it's just, I'm going to just this is I'm going to say the most brilliant thing ever. So it's tough, but I will go back to that original thing that I mentioned at the top of the interview, where that guy called me, and from California. I mean, he had no reason to do it. It was just out of the goodness of his heart. And again, he was just very honest with me. He told me that I was not even close to having something that was ready to be seen by the industry. And he gave me some good advice. And I often do wonder what would have actually happened if I had not gotten that. I might have just given up, and I might have gone back to Maryland after I graduated from college and just, as I said, started some sort of a career or job there. But I think for sure that was, I was in my junior year of college. So I was at this sort of inflection point where I knew I really didn't want to be an accountant, but I didn't want to do a second major. So it's kind of what you're saying. Those were the right words at the right time for me. And that was the motivation that I sort of needed. There was a realness to it. And it was a young guy. I mean, he was probably in his 20s. It's not like he had any credits or anything. I'm sure he was just some development guy, and I've tried to look him up. I sort of vaguely remembered his name, and I just look him up and thank him. I couldn't really remember his last name. His first name, I think, was Eric Galler, something like that. So again, it was just a very nice thing to do. But I think for me, those were the right words at the right time. I think if I could give any advice to anybody, giving someone the right words at the right time, again, for me, the big motivation to start writing and to consistently write was understanding that I had someplace to send these scripts. It just felt sort of like you're spinning your wheels if you have nothing. So that was what I tried to do with selling your screenplay. There's a million websites, blogs, podcasts out there on how to write a screenplay, how to improve your screenplay, the structure and this. So there's so much written on it that I decided to go the other direction. And I hope in some ways, I am inspiring people with those right words at the right time. If they know that, hey, there is this guy out here, there's a whole bunch of services and has a whole bunch of information on how to market your screenplay, that might be the motivation for someone to actually start writing it. So I think that's what I would leave to people. If that's what you're looking for, if you are wondering, what do I do? I don't feel the urge to write this screenplay because I don't really know what I'll do with it when I'm done. Then checking us out, check out sellingyourscreenplay.com, because that might be the answer for you. That might be the right words at the right time, because that's really what it was for me. And launching my career. Again, I really don't know what would have happened if that guy just hadn't taken 5 minutes out of his day to give me a call.
I think that's really what all it ever really takes,
Mm-hmm.
like I said before, I think we're all like in the same, like we're all pursuing the same thing, and we all crave to be the contributor. And all of us, like, we tap into certain things literally, I believe, because at least in my case, that's the truth, to keep the hope alive, and it's amazing, and how much value your words actually do have on people to carry them forward. And it's life and death, really. That's how powerful words that's how powerful words actually are, both the positive and the negative. And I think there's a way that we could actually contribute to the development and the sustainability, where just people hear the right thing at the right time. We're all going to benefit from that, because we're going to see the outcome in just a matter of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
I got to say, Ash, I really want to keep in touch with you, man. This was a wonderful conversation. I think like you have so much to offer and give people. I can't wait to start listening to your podcast more on a regular basis. And I guess that's it. Did you want to leave anybody with anything else?
No, I say likewise, folks. Seriously, thank you for reaching out. This has been fun just to come on here and have a conversation like this. And I think you're doing great stuff too. Just getting this information out there and just building community. That's really ultimately what it is all about, is that at the end of the day, you know, when we die, it's really not going to matter how many films, big movies, or how much money any of these things are done. It's really, what have we actually contributed? What have we given back? How have we made other people's lives better? How have we all sort of been a part of this community, which we are all a part of on some level. So I think you're doing great stuff too. So, and I'm sure we'll have conversations about film festivals. Just there's a lot of logistical things that I think I'm going through. And so maybe we can sort of help each other on that end as well.
Well, dude, if you ever need an actor, like give me a call. I mean,
yep. So yeah, you got to send me your IMDb link, and I'll put it in my database.
Oh my God. Yeah. You're going to get a kick out of that one. I'll tell you right now. All right. It's definitely on its way.
Gotcha. So, well, thank you much, man. We'll talk to you later.
All right. So wherever you go, whatever you do, always remember to never forget your community, the creativity, and find the joy in everything.
Sound advice. We'll talk to you later.
Ciao, Ash.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.